I just want to make a few complementary distinctions that will help you to understand Kant more fully. In the center of Kant's notion is the idea of a person. You are all people, you're persons. What does it mean to be a person? Well, a person is something that, in contrast with a mere animal or mere thing, is something that can be governed by reason. It's something that can apply reason and be governed by the moral law. According to Kant, no animal can do this. Any kind of good act that an animal may do, it will do so for some kind of animal inclination, instinct. So, a cat takes care of its offspring, but it doesn't do this because it's the right thing to do. It does this because it doesn't know anything else. But people, persons, are different. We are free and autonomous and have reason. And it says to be a person, you need to understand, or you need to assume, it's a better word, you need to assume that you are free. Because unless you assume that you are free, unless you live by the idea that you are free, that you have a choice, and that your will and your freedom can cause you to act, you're not really a person. You follow me? So a person must believe in his or her freedom. And, okay, Kant calls this a practical postulate, but this is not important what he calls it. The point is that we cannot avoid the idea of freedom. It is inherent in our very being as persons. It's also the case that people have dignity. And we'll talk more about dignity, much more about dignity. And dignity in the Kantian sense is this quality that persons have, that we are not satisfied with being treated like animals. A horse or a dog may be satisfied in being treated like animals because they are animals. So a horse or a dog is a good example. I mean, they are intelligent animals in many ways, and they're kind, and they're social and so on. But they're perfectly happy in being slaves to people, right? If you own a dog, the dog is kind of your slave. You toss it food, and it begs for more food, and so on. But a person cannot be content with living such a life. A person can never feel that it is flourish or that this life has purpose if this person lives as a dog would. So it is part of being a person that we have dignity. And dignity is this feeling that we are masters of our own nature and that we want to be treated as with respect to our humanity. And this notion of dignity requires that we seek to be free. It's only when we are free, in this strong sense, that we can maintain this dignity. And that's why it's so wrong, for instance, to enslave other people. Because when you enslave other people, you remove their dignity. You're making them animals, or less than human. Or but also when you lie to someone. So when you lie to someone, maybe even to protect them from themselves or from their emotions, you're treating them as non-people. That's why it's always forbidden to do this. You're violating the whole point of being a person, and that's dignity. So that's an important notion. And we'll come back to the notion of dignity. Because Kant, of course, when Kant wrote about this, he thought that all humans are persons, and all persons are humans. These two are the same thing. But we now know that this is not the case. We know that some humans are not persons. And we know that some future persons may not necessarily be human. We know some historical persons were not human. For instance, the Neanderthals. You're of course familiar with the Neanderthals? It's an extinct species. It's an extinct species, close relative to us. They lived in Europe and Central Asia, and they were part of the Homo family, but they were not, strictly speaking, Homo sapiens sapiens. Yet we think, we have strong reason to believe that they were persons, just as we are. We believe that they had language. We believe that they had religion, that they had some thoughts about the afterlife. We believe that they used fire and hunted animals and so on. And they had actually bigger brains than we have. So we should assume that they were persons, even though they were not, strictly speaking, human. We also know that in the future, humanity will evolve into another species, given enough time. If this evolution preserves our intelligence, and I think it probably will, but nobody knows. But if our intelligence is preserved through the evolutionary process, the future, the future people that will be related to us will also be people in this Kantian sense, but they will not necessarily be Homo sapiens. We could also imagine non-human intelligent species, maybe from other planets, maybe genetically engineered animals, or I mean in fantasy and fiction, there are a lot of possible species that are persons in this sense, but are not human, like elves and trolls, and maybe trolls are not persons. But anyway, dwarves and elves and aliens maybe, they're all persons, but they're not human. So we should think that we shouldn't automatically assume that human and person is the same thing. Even if they overlap. You could say that person is a moral category, whereas human is a biological category. So it's not strange that they might overlap or sometimes not overlap. Just as, different categories in different realms sometimes overlap and sometimes don't. Okay, so any more questions about Kant?
You just machine just one person live his freedom, but people live in a society. So one person's freedom will average into other people's freedom. Do you agree?
Okay.
So include it will lead to ethics.
You mean that
People live in society,
Mm.
so one person's freedom will conflict with others' freedom, which will produce some ethics problem.
Yes, okay, so if I understand you correctly, you're asking whether or not one person's freedom
Yeah.
can be, I mean, how do you balance? You have two people here, both should be free, and they both,
The not free, the not the same, maybe conflict.
yeah, how do you balance these things? Well, Kant doesn't give you an exact account of this.
Mm-hmm.
He just says that for us to be free, we have to follow these moral laws. We're not free all the time, but we should try to be as free as possible. And that means doing all these things, following our duty and applying pure reason to understand the categorical imperative. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that. But I think that Kant would say that in a perfect society, everyone follows the moral law and there's no conflicts. Because if everyone would do what the moral law says, then there would be no conflicts of interest between people. Because everyone understands what they should do in every particular moment.
So they should live in the same moral law.
Yes, yes. The moral law is nothing that changes according to circumstance. It's categorical. It's just there. It's these two principles, they're just, yeah, they don't change according to culture or time or something like that, according to Kant. And of course, I mean, a lot of people object to this and say, hey, Kant, I mean, there are different traditions in different parts of the world. What about this? And Kant says, no, well, I don't care. These are the rules that matter. And okay, so let me Kant was kind of very old-fashioned, and Michael Sandel discusses some cases where Kant really seems to be very old-fashioned. But I want to connect Kant with Rawls. So we talked about Rawls last time. And Rawls is a Kantian. And I want you to understand how they hang together. So Rawls believes that if we take this idea and apply it to politics, then the veil of ignorance follows. And I'm going to explain why. So we believe here that we should act in accordance with a maxim that you can will is universal. So what does that mean? That means that you need to be impartial. This is the kind of central idea of the Kantian, according to Rawls, of the Kantian philosophy. That you're not allowed to make exceptions for yourself or to kind of give yourself or your friends special treatment. You should be strictly impartial at all times. Because we are equal under the moral law, just as Kant said. So this implies to some kind of equality. Equality under the moral law. And that's why Kant says, for instance, when somebody violates one of these principles, someone kills someone else, for instance, then they have disturbed this equality. If I kill you, then I've treated you as less than human and treated myself as more than human. So I've elevated myself over the moral law and I have killed you. So to compensate for this imbalance, we need to kill me. I need to be killed by the government or by the state to reach back to the equilibrium. So this notion of equality is central in not only Kantianism, but in many different, well, also in utilitarianism, there's an indirect equality. So the idea of Rawls here is that impartiality and equality, it follows from Kant's idea. And if we interpret them in a political way, we should end up with the veil of ignorance. Because only behind the veil of ignorance are we truly impartial and truly equal? So when we are truly equal and impartial, we can decide as a group of rational people what kind of society we want to create. And in a society where those who created the society are impartial and equal, then you will have a society which cherishes equality. But here there are two different ideas, actually, because you have both this Kantian idea that everyone is equal under the moral law, so everyone deserves equal consideration. So that's some kind of principle of equality. But according to Rawls, we also, after doing this deliberation behind the veil of ignorance, we end up with an equality of outcome. Equality of outcome. And this is more controversial, because you can of course give everyone equal consideration, but not necessarily have an equality and an outcome that reflects this equality. Let me give you an example. Modern libertarians are also Kantians in this sense, that they believe that everyone is equally entitled to the fruits of their labor. Right? According to libertarians, each of us has the right to whatever they produce with their bodies. But they don't believe that we should have an equal society with equality of resources. Likewise, utilitarians believe that we should have equality of consideration. Everyone's happiness is equally worth, regarding if you're man or woman or black or white. You're equal, according to utilitarians. But yet again, it can also lead to equality of outcome in certain situations. For instance, a utilitarian might argue that an unequal society makes everyone better off. So only liberalism provides us with this equality of outcome idea. You remember the Maximin principle, which means to maximize the minimum outcome. Is this clear? You understand this idea? Okay. And from this idea of treating people as never as means comes the idea of rights. According to liberalism, and especially Rawls, the idea of rights comes directly from this idea that people have to be respected at all costs. So that's why we have a right of life, to life, assembly, rule of law, and so on. All the kind of modern liberal state rights. And note that these rights are not like utilitarian rules. I mean, a utilitarian could agree that, yeah, sure, we should have rights. That sounds like a nice idea. If we have rights, everyone will be happier. We should have the right of assembly, right to life, rule of law. It's really nice and good, like practical rules. But a utilitarian would say, if there's a situation where we benefit from violating rights, then we should do it. So let me give you an example from Michael Sandel, actually. I think it's a very good example. So there were a group of soldiers in Afghanistan, and they were deep into Taliban territory, and they found 2 goat herds from a village nearby. And the goat herds were unarmed, so they were taken by surprise. And the Taliban and the soldiers, they didn't know what to do. What should we do? They couldn't kill 2 unarmed civilians, of course. But they knew that if they let the civilians go, they would be fairly rapidly surrounded by the enemy. And they couldn't stay there and guard them because they had a mission, and if they would stay there, they would be found out pretty soon. What would you have done? What would you have done, Annie?
I didn't get you. What do you say?
Would you have killed the civilians, or would you have let them go?
I prefer the former.
I'm sorry?
I select the former.
You would kill them? Okay, you would execute 2 unarmed civilians. Okay. All right, yeah. What would you do?
I think same as her.
Yeah, okay. So you would be more utilitarian here, right? I mean, these guys, they were not guilty of any crime. They were 2 goat herds from Afghanistan. They were unarmed. And one of them was actually 14. So one of them was a child, a young boy. The other one was somewhat older. What would you do? You would kill them too?
Yeah.
Well, in fact, American soldiers are more moral than you are, at least on a Kantian liberal perspective. They didn't kill them. They let them go. They actually had a vote. There were 7 soldiers, and the captain said, okay, I can't decide this for my own. Let's have a vote. And they voted, and the majority said we should let them go. Yeah. A few hours later, they were completely surrounded by Taliban. They had called in a helicopter to pick them up. The helicopter got almost shot down by a rocket-propelled gun, and almost all of the platoon was wiped out. So only 2 people survived from the group. So in the end, you would say that more lives were lost by this decision. From a utilitarian point of view, it was not a good thing to do. But the rights of these people were respected. And according to a Kantian liberal view, this is what you should do. Even if the price is high, you should always respect rights. And that's when it becomes interesting. I mean, it's not difficult for you to respect my rights, right? It's not difficult for you to refrain from killing me. It's like, okay, you don't even consider killing me, I hope. But you don't even think about it. But in a situation like in Afghanistan, then it becomes difficult. So this is what we mean by rights, or what he means by the rights.
I have one question.
Yes.
If you let them go,
Hmm?
then I think your right to live is violated. And the soldiers.
The soldiers' right to live.
Yeah, would be violated, would be threatened.
It would be threatened, but it wouldn't be violated. Because these 2 goat herds, I mean, they're not going to kill anyone, right? They were just going to their village and telling them there's a group of American soldiers 10 minutes away, or I don't know, half an hour away. Right, thank you for this question, because I think there's a crucial aspect here that I have omitted, that I have forgotten to mention, and this is the distinction between act and omission. You better write this down, this is important. So when you act, then you actively do something. For instance, You put your M16 in the mouth of a 14-year-old boy and pull the trigger. That's an act. You actively did something. An omission, it's a failure to act, or a non-act. So, for a utilitarian, there is no difference. You should always maximize the expected benefit, regardless if you do this by acting or by refusing to act. And something is equally blameworthy, even regardless if it's an act or if it's an omission. What matters is the consequence, right? So if there's a drowning child in a pond, and I don't care, these are new shoes, I don't want to ruin them. According to utilitarianism, this is just as bad as if I would have drowned the child myself. Because the consequences is that the child drowned. According to Kant or Rawls, it's a huge difference. A person who acted and killed someone violated the right to life. A person who omitted to act didn't do anything. So omissions are allowed in a sense. You're not required to act. You're rather required not to act if your acts would harm someone or violate a right. So that's why this distinction between acts and omission are crucial to a liberal or a libertarian, but not for a utilitarian. And that's why we have this notion of rights, right? So the soldier who killed who didn't kill the goatherds, if he had killed them, he would have acted against this right to life. His omission to do so led to the death of more soldiers, but he didn't violate their rights. He just acted in a way that made their deaths possible. In fact, I mean, if we should blame anyone, we should blame the Taliban who killed them, right? I mean, they were the ones who were shooting the guns. It's like if you and I would go to, I would buy you a drink at a restaurant, and there's a suicide bomber at that restaurant. I mean, it's not my fault that you died. I mean, it's a suicide bomber who killed you. So that's this is a crucial difference, and very important for this to understand how they think. However, liberals such as Rawls believe that we can be and actually should be compensated for to increase this equality of outcome. But it is not a right. So you remember I mentioned last time that Rawls was in favor of a Scandinavian-ish welfare state, which balances out inequalities and makes the outcome more equal, maximizes the minimum. But this is not a right in this Kantian sense that we have everyone a right to life. Rather, this idea of maximizing the minimum, of creating a welfare state, comes from the idea that if we were behind this veil of ignorance, we would each one of us prefer to live in a state where no one was miserably poor, because if we were miserably poor, we just wouldn't risk that. All right, any questions about this? Let me then mention Michael Sandel's own theory, and I think I haven't given it too much time, and I think it's partly on purpose, because you would say that Michael Sandel's theory is It's also called virtue ethics. But I'm not sure that he mentions the word virtue ethics in his book. But it is it's a virtue ethics idea. And it also goes back to Aristotle. And according to Aristotle, everything in the universe, everything, including people, has a purpose. So there's the idea of purpose, or telos. And justice, or goodness, is to follow one's telos. So justice, or just the good, is to follow one's purpose. What is the purpose of man, of a human? Well, in one sense, Aristotle says that we are animals. Animals have different purposes. But what's uniquely human, it's our reason. So every human telos, is to use reason. And this sounds very similar to Kant, right? But it's a different approach. Because Kant says that we need to use reason to fulfill our freedom. Aristotle says that as humans, it is our purpose to use reason in our daily lives. But different people have different reasons. So if you're a shoemaker, then your purpose is to make shoes. The purpose of your life is to be excellent at whatever you're doing. So we use reason, and we should also strive for excellence. And this is, to strive for excellence is just to try to fulfill one's purpose as good as possible. And whoever uses reason and strives for excellence will be happy, according to Aristotle. This happiness that Aristotle is talking about is not the utilitarian happiness. It's not the kind of well-being pleasure. It's rather something more interesting, or more complicated, perhaps. And Aristotle calls it eudaimonia. And eudaimonia is the sensation, or the state that you're in whenever you strive for excellence in a reasonable way, or in a reasoned way. So whenever we ask that whether something is just, or if something is appropriate, or if it's good, we need to ask ourselves, according to Michael Sandel and Aristotle, does this fulfill the purpose, its true purpose? So let me give you an example. According to libertarianism, we respect everyone's freedom if we give them the right to their property, to do whatever they want with their property, right? And as a citizen of Sweden, for instance, we have a vote. So I have the right to vote. In a sense, the right to vote is my property, my privilege as a citizen of this country. A libertarian wouldn't mind that we would have a market for votes. So I sell my vote and you can buy it for 50 crowns or something like that. That's nothing strange in a libertarian world. Because it is my property. To respect my property properly, you need to respect my property rights, and among my property rights is to do whatever I want with my property, as long as it doesn't interfere with someone else's rights. Okay? So, should I be able to sell it? What do you think? Should I be able to sell my vote?
I would say no.
Why not?
If I wasn't speaking from any like any of the normative theory viewpoints, it's like you're going against the vein of democracy and everything when you sell your vote. And if you sell a vote to someone who's actually considering of buying a vote, that person or that party or that candidate will be rather unscrupulous. So to do it would be bad for the country, or bad for the elections, or bad for whatever it is they're voting for.
Okay, so we can have many arguments in favor or against this, right? We can either say that a libertarian would say, yeah, why not? Maybe. A liberal would say, maybe this is not such a good idea, we have the rule of law, and some rules are just need to be respected and so on. A utilitarian would say, maybe this will lead to bad outcomes. So some people who are unscrupulous and have a lot of influence, they would manipulate the system, and this will lead to kind of suboptimal levels of happiness. Sandel, or a virtue ethicist, would say, no, we can't sell it, because that's not the point of voting. The purpose of a vote is not to give every citizen a property right. The purpose of the vote is to engage the citizens in ruling themselves. So the purpose, the telos of the vote, is to engage the citizens in the fate of the country. If you vote, if you sell it, then you undermine the whole point. For a utilitarian, there is no telos with anything, right? The only point in life is to maximize happiness. If selling votes would lead to more happiness, then why not? A virtue ethicist would say no, that's against the whole purpose. This is kind of the idea here, that every institution, every rule, everything that exists has a certain purpose, and it's only just if we understand this purpose and correctly apply it. This is the very, very short version on virtue ethics. And the reason I'm not talking too much about it is because I kind of don't like this theory. So any questions?